Well, the presidential election, even before the COVID pandemic and before the civil unrest, is a really interesting election because we're in a period that we traditionally call realignment, where the political parties are beginning to shift. And in this instance, one party is going further to the right, one is going further to the left. And so this kind of election where there are two extremes that are the base create for a really interesting dynamic for the middle. With the pandemic and the civil unrest that related to Black Lives Matter and the murder of George Floyd, I think has created a very unstable dynamic. And so there's a lot of unpredictability normally during this period, but because of those two additional elements, we're going to see a lot of instability, and all bets are off for the election. It is not decided. We do not know what's going to happen, and anyone who tells you they know what's going to happen is a fool. I think COVID has been a net negative for President Trump for three reasons. Number one, it sort of highlights the importance of competence in government and the need for government to be there to respond in a comprehensive manner. And that tends to help Democrats more than Republicans. Number two, the response of the Trump administration has been inconsistent at best. And as a result, there's a lot of concern that President Trump has not handled it in a way that the American people wish he had. And then number three, and most importantly, is it has really, really destroyed the economic argument he was about to make this year, which would have been a very strong one for re-election. The economy is deeply troubled as a result, and that hurts President Trump. You know, vice presidents almost never matter in terms of final votes. On Election Day, people vote for the person at the top of the ticket. In this instance, there is a marginal impact in the sense that at his age, Joe Biden had to pick somebody who he knew could step in and be a strong president. And so it might affect some people's votes at the margins, but generally speaking, vice presidents really don't have any impact on the outcome. I think one of the things that political scientists are most troubled about, and I think that people should be most troubled about, is the increasing tendency for each of the two political sides in this country to think that the other is not only incompetent, but actually not very American. And so this sort of division that we see in this country is something that we really haven't seen for over 100 years. There's been a consensus centrism that has vanished, and we're seeing the manifestations of the consequences of that with extreme right and extreme left wings of the parties pulling the parties apart. That's not good for the American people. A Republican should feel okay, if not happy, about a Democratic president, and Democrats should feel okay, if not happy, about a Republican president. And in 2020, I don't think that's going to be true. And I think that spells great trouble for our system for several years, if not decades. What we are seeing now is sort of the culmination of a whole era where parties have become sort of denigrated, and they have decreased in their ability to coordinate the message. And as a result, we have a very high personalization of our presidential campaign, of our politics. And that kind of personalization is not unlike places like Venezuela, where you have a very charismatic leader who uses very manipulative language, and everybody sees them as the center of the government rather than the institutions of government as represented by the elected officials. And so what we see this year is actually a trend that might push us over the line of not worrying about substance of policy anymore when we decide to vote, but instead focusing only on the individual and their character. And again, that's no way to run a government, even if it is a way to win an election.